Alright, hello everyone and welcome to NFL Discussion. I'm your host and NFL enthusiast Stinky Doug. In today's episode I'm going to be discussing Monday Night Football Week 5 of the 2022 NFL season. So in this edition of Monday Night Football, two AFC West rivals, the Raiders and the Chiefs, went at it. Raiders had a nice 17-point lead going into half, but Kansas City was able to rally in the second half and get the win. And with that, we're going to get right into the action. Starting with the Raiders, Derek Carr completed 19 of 30 passes for 241 yards and 2 touchdowns. So the Raiders jumped the Chiefs out of the gate, putting up 17 straight points in the first half, thanks in large part to Derek Carr finding Davante Adams for a touchdown on a busted coverage, and Carr would later hook up with Adams for another touchdown in the fourth quarter. And with that touchdown, the Raiders would pull within 1 point at 30-29 with 4 minutes and 27 seconds left, and Josh McDaniels opted to go for 2 points instead of the extra point to tie. Josh Jacobs got stuffed on that attempt, which is what you get when you have no business going for it. However, really, there's a time and a place to go for 2, but fourth quarter in a game like this, with that little time left, you mess that up. You don't have much time to try and correct that if you don't get it. So, not the time, not the place for that. The Raiders would eventually get the ball back. But on 4th and 1, Carr got blitzed and ended up throwing an empty heave with 41 seconds left to play, which ended the game for the Raiders. I think he was trying to hit Davante Adams down the field, but him and Adams and Renfro ran into each other, so there went that. The Raiders are now 1-4 ahead of their bye, and coming out of their bye, they will have a Week 7 home date against the Texans. Josh Jacobs rushed 21 times for 154 yards and 1 touchdown, and 1 week after running for a career best 144 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Broncos. Jacobs bested that 8 days later with a new career high 154 yards and the score. He's been one of the best running backs in football through 5 weeks and continues to look the part in the passing game with another 5 catches for 39 yards on 5 targets, which were the receiving yards were actually second on the team. He is rarely coming off the field, but now he heads into a bye and gets a well-deserved rest. He's running with power and decisiveness, gashing defenses between the tackles. He's also in a contract year too, and if he keeps this up, he'll get himself a nice little contract at the end of the season. So for the Raiders, I think penalties are definitely the biggest issue in this game. Yeah, there was a Matt Wright kick that he missed, but then the Chiefs got the ball back on offense because of a holding call. Not quite sure how you end up holding on a kick attempt, but nonetheless, the Raiders figured out a way to do it. And, penalties were definitely an issue in this game for both teams, and so was the refereeing. But some of those penalties against the Raiders were that was just on them. So I think going into the bye week, they got to learn to close out games, or figure out how to close out games, and also figure out how to cut back on penalties, like holding on the kick attempt. Moving on to the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes completed 29 of 43 passes for 292 yards and 4 touchdowns. So Kansas City got off to a slow start in this game, falling into a 17-0 hole going into half, I guess midway through the second quarter. They were able to put some points on the board at half. Mahomes would find Kelsey in the second quarter to make it 20-10 at the half, and then Mahomes would end up throwing her close to 200 yards after the break, which pretty much erased the deficit entirely. And while he was at it, he threw 3 more touchdowns to Kelsey, which totaled 4 on the night between the duo. Mahomes leads the league with 15 touchdown passes, and he and second place Josh Allen at 14 will square off at Arrowhead next Sunday in a huge rematch that could decide who rules the AFC. So Travis Kelsey got 7 of 8 targets for 25 yards and 4 touchdowns. And you want to talk about taking advantage of opportunities? Kelsey had 25 yards on the game, which are the fewest ever among a player to catch 4 touchdowns in a game. His scores accounted for all of Mahomes' touchdowns. And even at 33 years old, he's not slowing down or showing any signs of slowing down. He's now scored in 4 or 5 games to start the season and has 7 on the year. And he gets a Week 6 date with the Bills, and that one should be electric. And most importantly, with this win, KC maintains their grip on the AFC West. The Raiders are, the Raiders are under 500 quite significantly at 1-4. So they got some work to do to try to dig themselves out of the hole that they buried themselves in. The Broncos, well, they stink on offense. Their offense is no good. Their defense is a little bit better. And the Chargers, well, injuries kind of got a hold on them at the moment. They did get a win against the Browns. So at the very least, they know how to win despite being down some people. But yeah, you definitely got to wonder long term how those injuries are going to affect them. But KC proves, though, that, even when they're down, they're not out. And Mahomes is certainly the type of guy you want to have a quarterback when you need to make a rally and get some points. And out with a guy like Kelsey in the red zone, he's a difference maker, simply put. And, I know there was that Chris Jones roughing the passer thing. And I'm sure a lot of people have talked about it, so I won't go into a long-winded rant. But even I didn't like that call. I mean, really, I get trying to protect the quarterback and everything else, but there's also this thing called common sense. And I feel like what's not happening is common sense. Referees aren't using common sense. Like on a call like that, you just gotta use common sense and be like, okay, yeah, sure, according to the rules, he's not supposed to land on the guy. But as Troy Aikman pointed out, what is he supposed to do? You gotta use common sense there and understand that with the way that Chris Jones was going to the ground, there was really no way he could have done anything else other than land on the guy. So really, you just gotta clean up that roughing the passer, gotta take a good hard look at that, and also, you gotta hold the referees accountable when they're making calls like that. Yeah, sure, they might be just doing their jobs and following the rules, but ultimately, what you're doing could very well screw over a team, and screwing over a team is a bigger issue than you doing your job. You should not be doing your job if it means screwing over an NFL, right? Or maybe not that, but you should definitely understand that when you make calls like this, big calls like this, there should be something else in place to ensure that it's not all on the referee. Make it so that New York has to sign off on that call as well too, because you just can't be having calls like that could change or even decide the outcome of a game. There just needs to be better management of penalties in key situations. So that's all I'll say about that. But I guess nonetheless, it didn't really screw the Chiefs over. Thankfully, it didn't decide the game. But yeah, that would have been a lot more ugly if it was. And the Chiefs fans were right to get after him for that one. And I know he defended the call, saying he was just doing his job, but at the same time, dude, use common sense. So refereeing kind of becoming an issue here, and it doesn't seem like Roger Goodell has any interest in holding refs accountable and everything else. So we'll see if anything actually comes out of it this time around. But enough about that. Let's move on to my favorite segment of the week, and that is the throwing in the towel segment. So every week I pick one team and throw in the towel on their season, basically labeling them as pretenders, not contenders. So week 1 it was the Jets, week 2 it was the Texans, week 3 it was the Seahawks, and week 4 it was the Panthers, who fired their head coach. Now, what I will say about the Panthers and Matt Rule is that it seemed inevitable that he would be fired. I mean, it was an interesting hire at the time, but I'm always skeptical when a guy comes in from college and then takes a head coaching job. Always skeptical at first because I don't really see how it could work, and it never really did work. Yeah, there was the whole carousel quarterback, but even if they did have a franchise guy, I don't know if Matt Rule would have been the guy to get the most out of that quarterback. And sure, Christian McCaffrey being injured was an issue, but he was healthy this year and you still weren't able to do anything with him. You traded for Baker Mayfield, that hasn't helped you, and now you're basically 1-4, staring down the barrel of a losing season. It makes sense that this happened. And now Steve Wilkes takes over. We'll see if he can do any better with the Panthers than he did with the Cardinals. He was just not a good coach when he was with the Cardinals, and I know that roster was terrible, but I mean, ultimately you didn't show any promise as a head coach when you were with the Cardinals, so we'll see if he does any better this time around. But yeah, did feel kind of inevitable that was going to happen. But then we move on to this week's team. So I got 2 teams in the AFC, 2 teams in the NFC, and ultimately my decision came down between the Commanders in the NFC and the Steelers in the AFC. And after thinking it over and everything else, and looking at who the Steelers play next and who the Commanders play next, my team this week is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Mike Tomlin's been head coach in Pittsburgh for 15 years, and during that time he's never had a losing record, not once. But it will probably take a miracle to keep that streak going in 2022, because these Steelers are officially in down bad territory. And it's not surprising that they lost to a Bills team that's one of the best in the AFC, but you didn't just lose. You got embarrassed, outclassed in every facet of the game, dominated. So, and when you look at the Steelers team, the way they're set up, they went into the season with Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback with the hope that he would kind of hold the fort down while Kenny Pickett gets to learn and develop behind him. Ultimately, that plan did not work out. Mitchell Trubisky did not have a great start to the season, so now Kenny Pickett is their guy. So you're rolling out a rookie quarterback, and you're doing so behind a bad offensive line, and the run game is nowhere to be found to help them out. And also your defense continues to not show up in games about TJ Watt in the lineup. I get he's your best player, but I mean, come on, you have other talented players too, and you're telling me you still can't show up. So simply put, this Steelers team, it's bad. It is bad. They're 1-4 in the cellar of the AFC North, and I think that's where they'll stay. I don't see them, passing the Browns for 3rd place. And with that, we'll go and wrap up this episode of NFL Discussion. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit that like button down below.